the Epstein files, the people mentioned in the Epstein files, have focused attention on the associations and connections and conduct of a lot of powerful individuals, including Bill Gates, who is a famous philanthropist, among other things. He's now a very famous philanthropist. And this is part of Charity Watch's world, is to cover philanthropy, which is why I'm bringing it up here. My name is Laurie Styron. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of Charity Watch. I want to talk today about, should we separate the art from the artist, right? When a very powerful, wealthy philanthropist donates a lot of money to charities or funds their own nonprofit organization that then conducts its own programs around the world that have a really significant impact on a lot of people. To what extent should we only look at that impact? At what extent should we say, well, we can excuse a lot of potentially bad behavior or lapsed moral judgment from that person on the basis that they're doing so much good in the world, right? Back in 2021, a former program officer of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which is now the Gates Foundation, a former program officer of that foundation wrote an opinion piece in the Chronicle of Philanthropy, which is the paper of record in the nonprofit sector. And if you click at the link at the end of this video, you can navigate to an article on our site that tells you more about that and quotes from his opinion piece. But basically what he was asserting, I'm paraphrasing here, is that we journalists and donors and other stakeholders in the nonprofit sector should essentially ignore Bill Gates's associations or his personality traits that might be more negative. He in this article, this former program officer described Bill Gates as, quote, not the nicest person. And he essentially asserted that we should ignore those things because of the philanthropic impact of how much good he's doing in the world through his donations and charity work. I strongly disagreed with that back in 2021, and I still strongly disagree with that now. Back then, I wrote a counter opinion piece where I kind of laid out all of my points of why I disagreed with that. Now, here's the thing. The first thing is I love philosophy, and I'm always looking for logical fallacies in people's arguments. So there was a glaring one in this former program officer's argument, which is the classic false dichotomy, false binary, right? He sort of suggested that we can either look at the good Bill Gates and his charitable work has done in the world, or we can hold him accountable for his personality traits that might be negative or his conduct or associations, but somehow sort of implying we can't do both. Well, why can't we do both? Classic false binary. Of course we can do both. We can both acknowledge and measure the impact that Bill Gates and other philanthropists have had in the world, and we can simultaneously hold them accountable for their behavior, right? And in fact, I argued in my article, and I'll tell you now, not only can we do that, we should do that. We have a duty to do that, because anytime you're talking about excusing bad behavior, usually, and I'm saying this in general, right? Not in a legal sense, right? I'm saying this in general, but usually whenever you're talking about excusing or disregarding or ignoring someone's bad behavior, usually there are some victims of that bad behavior. And if you make that argument, you are implicitly saying that the suffering of those people doesn't matter, that it's okay that they were thrown under the bus on the basis that this person somehow offset those bad things that they did, or the associations or the lapses in judgment, that somehow that's offset by the good they did in the world. I think that you can understand that that argument can send people down a very, very destructive, very bad path. And so, I would suggest to all of my, my colleagues and my cohorts in the nonprofit sector, I know that a lot of people, because from what I saw, I was one of the only people at that time that was calling out this kind of behavior several years ago. It's a lot easier to call it out now after the Epstein files came out than it was back then. Going to give myself a little bit of credit. But, a lot of people in the philanthropic world, you know, they're they're not going to be too excited to criticize a philanthropist that has a lot of money because they're hoping, hey, maybe one day I can apply for a grant. Maybe I can get access to some of that money. And so I don't want to say anything. I don't want to take myself out of the running. I'm sure that I've taken my organization out of the running with my criticisms. But, you know, I think that we've all, over the past few years, had to consider that people can have vastly different political opinions, morals, values, ethics. And these things are complicated, right? They all exist on a spectrum, and you can make lots of arguments for your opinions and why you conduct yourself the way that you do, and this, that, and the other, right? But there is a point where you want to be on the right side of history and drawing a line in the sand and saying, you know what, no amount of grant money, potential grant money, it is worth my soul, right? And so when powerful people in the philanthropic world or otherwise, when they need to be held accountable for things, it's not just that we can do that and that we should do that. We have a duty to do that. We have a duty to do it. And you know, bad behavior is also on a spectrum, right? I do think it's important to say, I meant to say this at the beginning of the video, because this is, this is in the article on our site at CharityWatch.org, but, any references to Bill Gates and the other people in the Epstein files, those references alone neither establish guilt nor do they confer innocence, right? Right now, that stuff is still being analyzed and investigated. I'm not an attorney. I'm not that type of investigator, so I have no inside knowledge about anything related to that. But as I asserted in my article in 2021, excuse me, it's very important that we do hold powerful people accountable. And as that relates to my work here at Charity Watch, a lot of powerful people with a lot of money, they do move a lot of charitable dollars around in the world. And we should be tracking that, and we should be holding people accountable for how they move in the world in that way, in the nonprofit sector and otherwise. This is very long, so I'm going to stop here, but please click on the article at the end of this video, and I hope this was interesting. This video on YouTube has a comment section. Let me know if you agree or disagree. I am interested in hearing other opinions. Again, my name is Laurie Styron. I'm the CEO and Executive Director of Charity Watch. Thanks for listening.